You ever wonder what secrets are locked away inside you? Well, in the last decade or so, companies like 23andMe and AncestryDNA have made it incredibly easy to find out. But here's the thing. In unlocking the secrets of our past and our future health, we might be creating a permanent digital version of ourselves. And it's one with complexities we're really only just beginning to wrap our heads around. So let's get into it, how we got here, and what it actually means to digitize our very essence. So let me just ask you this. What's your most sensitive piece of personal data? Is it, I don't know, your bank account password, your social security number? We're taught to guard those things with our lives, right? But what if I told you that you're probably giving away something that is way more personal, way more revealing, and, well, infinitely more permanent? And that really gets to the heart of the issue. Look, if your password gets leaked, you just change it. If your credit card gets stolen, you cancel it and get a new one. But your DNA, that's a totally different ballgame. It is the biological source code that makes you, you. You can't just hit reset. You can't request a new one. Once it's out there in the world, it is out there forever. So how in the world did we get to a place where millions of us are just mailing our fundamental biological blueprint to private companies? Let's take a look at the appeal, the promise that has made this industry absolutely explode. You know, the process itself couldn't be any simpler, and that's completely by design. They send you a kit, you send back a sample, you get your results. It feels as casual and routine as ordering a book online, and that's a deliberate choice, one that kind of masks the huge complexity of what you're actually handing over. And the appeal is just so powerful because it taps into our most fundamental human questions, right? Who am I? Where did I come from? What does my future hold? These companies, they're not just selling you a test. They're selling answers, they're selling connection, and they're selling a sense of control over our own story. But here's where the story takes a turn. Once that saliva sample is in the mail, your DNA gets digitized. It becomes data. And just like any other data, it can be copied, it can be shared, and it can be stolen. It becomes this permanent digital fingerprint that you can never, ever erase. 6.9 million. Okay, that is not just some abstract number. That is the number of user profiles that were exposed in the 23andMe data breach back in 2023. So for millions of people, their most intimate data, their ancestry, their genetic relatives, their health risks, was suddenly in the hands of hackers. Now, companies will often tell you that they protect you by anonymizing your data, stripping your name from it. But here's the catch. Genetic data isn't truly anonymous. There's this process called re-identification, and researchers have shown it's actually surprisingly easy to connect the dots from public records, think voter rolls, all the way back to a supposedly anonymous DNA profile. And this brings us to probably one of the most famous examples of this power in action. For decades, the Golden State Killer was a complete ghost. Then, in 2018, investigators took DNA from a crime scene and they uploaded it to a public genealogy site. Now, they didn't find him directly, but they found his distant cousins. By building out a family tree, they zeroed in on one man, which led to a historic arrest. It was a massive time for justice, for sure, but it also opened up a huge ethical can of worms. Which brings us to this question. Really think about it. You never took a DNA test, but your third cousin did, maybe just out of curiosity. Well, because you share DNA, their decision has now involved your entire family's genetic privacy. It's potentially given law enforcement a key to your shared genetic code, all without your consent. So, where do we draw the line? And believe me, the risks don't stop there. We could be looking at a future where life insurance companies deny you coverage because you have a genetic predisposition to a certain disease, or governments using mass DNA collection for surveillance and social control. It honestly sounds like something out of science fiction, but these are very real concerns being discussed by security experts today. So with the stakes this high, you'd think there would be ironclad rules protecting this data, right? Well, the reality is that the law is playing a frantic game of catch-up with the technology, and what we're left with is this patchwork of different rules and some pretty big loopholes. So if we look globally, there are two major legal frameworks. Over in Europe, you've got GDPR, which treats DNA as special category data. That gives it really broad privacy protections across the board. The US, however, takes a different approach. Its main law, called GINA, is much, much narrower. It's not really a privacy law at all. It's a very specific anti-discrimination law. And that narrow focus creates a massive loophole. GINA is great because it prevents your employer or your health insurer from discriminating against you based on your genes. But it offers absolutely zero protection when it comes to life insurance, disability insurance, or long-term care insurance. That door is left wide open for discrimination. So, okay, after all these risks and loopholes, I know it can feel a little bit grim, but the story isn't over. The conversation is starting to shift now from just focusing on the problems to finding the solutions. How do we actually build a safer framework for our collective genetic future? The path forward isn't just one single thing. It's got to be a combination of forces. It's going to require stronger global regulations to close all those legal loopholes. It requires better technology, like advanced encryption, to create tougher safeguards. And maybe most importantly, it requires empowering us, the users, with clear education and simple controls that give us the final say over who gets to see our biological source code. And that leaves us with this final, really powerful question. The technology itself, it's neutral. It holds this incredible promise to revolutionize medicine and connect us to our past. But it also holds the potential to become the most powerful tool for surveillance and control ever invented. The choice of which path we take, well, that's not up to the technology. That's up to us.